Hey, good morning, everybody. We've got Jolissa Hebard with us this morning, and she's an experienced firecracker mom. So you've been involved with the organization a few years, I think three total, and you've been through a couple of different teams right now. So quickly, just tell me the first team that you entered the organization with.
The first team that we were on was the Firecrackers Holcomb Night.
Great. And
Yes.
so I was mentioning that's a great cultural type atmosphere, and Ted does a lot of things right. And then I kind of moved you through, did you say Coach Cantrell's team
Yes.
last year? And then this year you're currently with
With
Brashear Oaks.
Brashear
Royal
Oaks, yes.
Yeah, awesome.
The
And
second year 12s.
How's that been so far this year?
Fantastic, really, honestly. It's been a great team. The families are great, the coaching's great, the girls are great. It's really coming together. We're really excited about this season.
Excellent. Well, that's what I like to hear because as I was mentioning, the cultural aspect of this and these environments, so that we can experience these crazy waters that we're in travel ball, and me trying to lend my guidance and advice to coaches to kind of fast forward their experience because when you can kind of minimize the ups and downs, kind of keep it a little more balanced, it tends to hold people down a little bit more because we understand that this is a business and we have a service to provide for you. So, and what I'm really thankful and appreciative for is this morning you're coming in. There was an event that happened over the last weekend. We lost another one of our players and took her own life. And so it hits home for a lot of people and it shakes up the softball culture. I've been doing this a long time, and this is not our first suicide that we've dealt with. I don't think I bet that it will be our last. I hope that it is. But I will tell you something that I'm looking for is a little more sustainability in our awareness. In the past, when it's happened, it's a hot topic for a little while because it's emotionally kind of there, and then we're back to status quo of normal operations, and then you see just the normal behavior, and it's normal behavior. But at what point is it becoming? I don't think the behavior becomes destructive, but at what point in somebody's mind is all of a sudden things aren't okay? And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you're involved now with suicide prevention.
Yes.
And so personally, you spend a lot of time volunteering or putting your own time into it and helping out. So how did you get involved with suicide prevention, if you don't mind me asking?
No, of course. I do have a lot of credentials, but I think my biggest credential is I'm a mom of an attempter. My son, in between his junior and senior year, attempted and nearly lost his life. From that event, it motivated me. It, basically took over my heart and soul and to try to prevent another family from going through what we went through.
Sure. And can I ask, did you see it coming? Were there signs that had he been going through anything before, getting help with anything? Because sometimes parents don't know. And
There was, we had taken him to therapy. My husband and I had gone to couples therapy
Okay.
and family therapy and things like that. And we had talked about it. I have mental illness in my family. My sister has attempted previously when we were younger, and it's not something that I wasn't familiar with, but it was definitely something that I wasn't sure how do you talk about this?
Sure.
How do you make sure that you have the answers or the resources or where to go?
And when there's a history in the family, so there's a likelihood that the younger kids are a little more predispositioned to that, correct? I mean, it can repeat
Yes, it
itself.
can.
And so it's something for families to be important to know if you have a family history or to know some family history because you can increase your
Absolutely.
awareness and educate yourself a little bit more.
Absolutely. And just because someone has a mental health issue does not necessarily mean that person is suicidal, but those two things can definitely go together.
Right. And that's really ultimately what we're trying to do. We want everyone to be happy, but that ultimate final decision is something that we definitely don't want to have take place.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about your education. And so this kind of spurred you into a direction, being motivated and wanting to help others. So you've got a few things that you've accomplished for yourself as I look at, some of the things you've done, and you've been busy. So I commend you on that.
I have been a little bit busy. I went through a program with Loyola Marymount to be a peer advocate for transitional age youth. So transitional age youth are from 15 to 25, and that is the population that is kind of, with the exception of the elderly, is most at risk really for suicide.
Okay.
So those are the
15
two
through 19,
ends.
right.
Yeah, and the 1 in 5 Americans live with a mental health problem. Half of those present around the age of 14. 3/4 of those are then found by the age of 24. So we're talking about our girls.
Wow,
From
yeah.
the beginning of high school to the end of college. That's that's the age range where some of these things really start to present.
And what's the percentage of people that are actually getting the right type of help versus people that are just trying to cope on their own, and it's kind of an uphill battle, right?
I don't even think there would be a way to quantify that.
But yeah, that's what I
Even
kind of
with-
wonder is who has it, who's troubled, and realize that you can't do this on your own.
In the crisis text line that we'll talk about, it over indexes in low income.
Yeah,
So they get a lot more of their texters come from low income neighborhoods.
interesting.
Potentially because it's a free service,
Sure.
But there are a lot of resources out there that don't have to be expensive.
Sure. Okay. Tell me about some of the other things you've involved yourself with. You said you were mentioning that it's a National Alliance on Mental Illness. So.
Yes, so NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's the largest grassroots mental health organization. It started in 1979 with families sitting around a table talking about how do we cope with this? What do we do?
Families that had experience.
That have experience.
Right.
So and NAMI is open to anyone that has a loved one with a mental health issue, or if you yourself have a mental health issue. So family, friends, business associates, anyone can come in. It's completely free. All the classes and things that they provide are paid for through donations. They do a big walk every October. And what I do with them is I present for In Our Own Voice. So I've gone to churches, I've gone to high schools, I've gone to different areas and talked about what it's like to live with a mental health issue and then how you can recover. They have several programs. They have a basics class, so you can go and learn the ins and outs a little bit of mental health, dealing with doctors, different providers, things like that. They have connections meetings. They're, like I said, they're national, so they're represented in every state.
Wow.
And
They're
it's
there.
a really great resource. Yes.
Yeah. That's again, I think that's what we want to do is educate people and let them know that this is out there. So so what is that experience like when you're speaking with groups? Is it are they all pretty emotional? Did they get involved, or does it kind of blindside them with the reality? Is it kind of a whole realm of things? What's it been like?
The way I look at it is the work that I do with all of these groups is I am a merchant of hope. I'm there to provide the hope that there is a life after a diagnosis, that there can be, recovery and I would hate to say normal because I've yet to meet
Sure.
anyone with a normal
Sure.
life.
What is normal? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can
Balance.
balance.
Say
You
that.
can
Right. To find,
you can live and work and make it and be okay.
And that's a big part of this as far as the kind of moving through something that somebody has is to hear it from people that have been able to cope and do utilize the strategies and what's available to them. And it's really the stories. And I would imagine even with suicide, the people that there's a pretty powerful video of the gentleman that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And,
Yes.
and the one thing that really gets me is he says the minute he jumped, he regretted it. And he said that was what was in common with all the other survivors that have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And I think that's an important, powerful message because I think so far in my education is, that escape clause for them when, hey, this is the answer for me just to get away. It's not about how I'm going to hurt people and all the people that care about me. This is an opportunity for me to just disappear. And it's not about the act even, and it's interesting to know how that mind can work like that and for us to understand that.
With my son, he said the same thing immediately after he regretted it, and he said, I don't want to die. It wasn't about dying, and it was about the pain. It's a solution to the pain. It's not because they don't want to be alive anymore. Typically, it's because they're in so much pain and they don't know how to escape that pain. And it's hard as the family or friends. I know when my son was in the ICU, it was all about what did we do, or how could how could this have happened to us, or all of that, and it's really not about that.
And you had already been in therapy and so seeking some help, but what in the emotional side of it, was it is there guilt on your end of it as a parent? Is there questioning? What was the strongest emotion that might not have been correct, or did you feel like you had everything that you needed and you went through it as well as you should have. I mean, to me, I wonder, like, it's a real hard question to ask your son or daughter if you're depressed or, do you feel like you're suicidal? And well, why is it such a scary question? And I, as a parent, say, because you're scared to death that they're going to say yes. But, and again, part of this education is, number one, explaining that somebody that survives it regretted it. I think that's important for people to understand that part of it. And for parents to understand that, asking about it isn't going to make them more suicidal, right?
And thank you for mentioning that, because that's an important fact that people need to understand. The research shows and proves that asking someone, are you thinking of killing yourself, does not plant a seed.
Right.
But what happens is if you ask someone who is, they're likely to say yes and tell you about it.
Really important.
Really important.
Because I relate to the fearful parent, of not understanding educationally what it is and just say, hey, wow, because you fear for your kids. It's really important that ask.
Yes.
If you think and you suspect, right?
Yes, and asking in the correct way, because something like, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Is really easy to say, no. But if you say, hey, I noticed that you've said that you're really tired and, you said you wanted to go to sleep and never wake up. Sometimes when people say things like that, they mean they're thinking of killing themselves.
Sure.
Is that what you're thinking of doing? It
Are there
lends
other
an
behavior?
empathetic ear. It lets them know
Right.
that it's safe to talk. The other thing that's important is that, and this is kind of scary, most of the time, the kids aren't telling an adult. They're telling another friend.
Right.
My son told the girl that he had a crush on, and she didn't tell anybody because she didn't know who to tell or what to do, or if she was going to get in trouble, or if he was going to get in trouble, or, there's all these, liability ramifications. Sure. And the fact of the matter is that no one is legally responsible unless you are a therapist or, you have a medical degree that you should be a mandatory reporter.
Right.
But as a coach, as a teacher, as a concerned parent, you are not liable for what happens. You can save a life by just saying this.
I think that's an important point to bring up too, because in our softball world, we all care about our kids. As parents, we care about our kids, but to be honest with ourselves and know that we're not the person that they would be expressive with. But it's if we can handle the responsibility of providing the outlets to them, and so whether it's a mentorship program or we're going to talk a little bit about the text line or whatever it is, but they have outlets. And because if we can provide more of these outlets like the text line, it can maybe, so it's not just their peer group that's maybe not capable of knowing what to do with that information. So,
Exactly.
if somebody reaches out, we definitely want to be able to help them.
Absolutely.
Are there other behaviors and any other signs that people or is it, sometimes under the radar as far as noticeable? Because, we all go up and down in behavior and we all have, emotions. I tell the kids, what was the Pixar movie about the emotions, and so many of these cartoons, are about how to kind of deal with your life and things like that. So it's not that emotions are going to go away, and it's not that anxiety or worry or sadness or things, but imbalances of these. So are there any other behaviors or any warning signs to look out for?
There can be, definitely. Things like giving away possessions. There's indicators that show that someone could be depressed if they're sleeping a lot or not sleeping at all. There's definitely warning signs, but it could also be that there's not. With my son, we had gotten into an argument, but there was no big production. There was, none of that.
Some of these kids that I've been involved with in travel ball in these situations, their lives are so busy, and they're going from one task to another, and it's almost to disrupt that process. They don't want that. It's hey, let's stop and talk. Hey, you shouldn't be hitting because you're back. No, please just let me finish this. Let me get through this. I've got things I have to do, and and you feel this. In my experience, I felt this insurmountable pressure and no outlet, and you can just see it build up. And so, again, the importance of educating, and I think that's really, really important. So, so now you volunteer for the as a crisis counselor for the text line.
Crisis text line.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So the crisis text line, which we would definitely suggest you go to the website, which is crisistextline.org, to check it out before you just text in. But it was founded in 2013 from the rib of the DoSomething.org. So that's the largest organization for young people in social change. And those young people were texting in, having problems, asking questions. And so the founder of that opened this, very quietly launched it in August of 2013.
That's what I was going to ask, how long it's been around. And then ask how the participation's been. I mean, imagine it's being utilized more and more, or?
Within 4 months, it was being used in all 295 area codes in the United States.
Wow.
It is expanding into Canada soon, so they're looking for Canadian crisis counselors. The 2 words used to describe the crisis text line are empathy and innovation. So it's a human first policy. We believe that every texter deserves a human response, and they get that. There's 3 levels of review. So when a texter texts in, there's an algorithm that reads to let us know how severe it is, and they're coded by color. They then get one of the crisis counselors like me on the text, and most of the conversations last about 30 minutes to an hour. They're very involved. We are highly trained on how to respond to someone that is in a crisis. As well as us, there are supervisors that are monitoring all the conversations, and those supervisors hold a higher degree either in social work or psychology, psychiatry, and they're monitoring.
There's plenty of support. There's plenty of
yes.
Infrastructure there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we have, one of the ones that I was involved in was we had an active rescue, and we got her location, we got, let her know, got the police kind of involved, and she ended up, going with her mom to the hospital. But the word today is used 6 times as often as any time reference in those texts. So we are in that crisis moment at the time, and we are taking them from a really hot moment to a cool, calm moment within that text.
Pretty powerful experience for you, being on the other end.
Absolutely.
Fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just think if my son had this number,
sure.
if I'm helping one other person avoid the confusion and terror and pain that we went through, it's all worth it.
And so our listeners can find the number, get the information from Crisis Text Line.
CrisisTextLine.org. The number is 741-741, and that is, like I said, national. You can text hello, you can text hi, you could text NAMI. NAMI on their website has a little button, so it's really kind of spread its tentacles, throughout this community, and it's really working.
Right.
And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that when it was launched, we assumed that it would be mostly teenagers texting, and now we see that 20% of the texters are over 25. So there's adults texting in as well. It's available for anyone, and it doesn't have to be that you are suicidal. It can be any moment of crisis.
So you can have extreme anxiety, you can feel depressed, you can feel
if you're
angry,
cutting, if you have an eating disorder, if you're fighting with your boyfriend, if you're getting bullied at school,
wow.
if the election is bothering you, of those things.
Things are okay. That's a great point because again, we're in such a heightened emotional state through social media and through for whatever the reasons, but that it is just so critical that if you're just not okay, if it doesn't feel okay, because that's something that again, that internal battle of, well, this is normal, I've got to deal with it, some old school, which is a certain reality of building resiliency of deal with life as it comes, but there's a tipping point, and so it's the parameters within normal limits of ups and downs of life, but when they're not inside normal limits, and that's something that I want our coaches and our parents to understand, that it's not about you being an abuser or an abusive coach or this. It's really how it's interpreted. I mean, we are living in a world right now where it's so little about what somebody means, and it's all about how somebody takes it. And it really makes it hard to communicate with people because you can be from the honest goodness of your heart trying to say something, but let's say you're not experienced or educated or prepared for really the ramifications, and then it gets twisted. And now social media, and it's this... it's this big, it's like the judge, jury, and the trial, and everything happens right there. And so the instability of our society, and then you have the people that are outspoken and they're throwing the pebbles in the water, and that's what they do. And they really, so much of it is just reactive. So but in reality, Jolissa, I always tell our coaches that we've got to prepare our kids for as much as the reality of life is a jungle, and I wish we could take all the bad things out, and I wish we could have, but that's really not the balance. So try to minimize all those things outside of those parameters, take away those extreme risks and dangers, what we have in medicine and just overall behavior awareness, but there's still, you have to have a certain resiliency, because that's been the secret for every species and animal on the food chain since time is so we have to have that. But I think it's great that right now, because I think it's hard in my experience for people to manage. Let's look at the softball world, all of the things that take place in the softball world. So now I want to flip it, because I'm basically in your hands, and this has been amazing to listen to you. Flip it on the other side, where you've never reached out to me and had to come into my office and ask me if everything's going to be okay with your daughter and in recruiting stress and all this. But I get this all the time, and I see the worry, and I see the actions and the decisions that people are making to try to give their daughter what they think is an equal opportunity to have marketing ability in the college recruiting market. Let's just take that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But when I hear what they're doing, and they're not getting the advice and not getting the guidance, and they're trying to keep up with the softball Joneses, and then they're really getting the advice from the influencers that happen to be the parents of the best player on the team, the 4 dads behind the backstop. Nothing against these people, they're all in our culture, but are they the most experienced? Have they navigated these things? Have they been through the ups and downs? And so often I'm never surprised, but I'm always amazed by what people think they need to be doing, the amount of money they need to be spending, and so there's this ultimate stress that even factors into the husband and wife at night, maybe bickering or maybe not having that peace when their head hits the pillow. Now, we're talking about serious crisis hotlines. I'm not saying that someone's really worried about recruiting shouldn't use this text line, but for me, this is within normal parameters of the softball world, but you have to have someone like me to help navigate you through it, which again is the purpose for these podcasts. The purpose for our YouTube segments, anything like that, is that I'm not here to put myself in front of your face and tell you need to do this or that, but I want you to know that I'm always here. And so if we circle back to kind of how this relates to our softball world, is that one of the overall most powerful messages that we want to get across to these players, is that you're never alone and there's always someone here? Absolutely.
I mean, I think that needs to be on everybody's page at all time, that you are not ever alone. I know with me, I always felt alone, and that was part of what prompted me to make the decisions I made, and took me down certain paths. Mm-hmm. And I know with my son, he said he felt like he was always alone. And it's strange, because I've told my kids, feeling alone is what makes us all the same. Like, we all feel that loneliness. We all feel somewhat disconnected sometimes. You're not having a cute day, you're not feeling your outfit, whatever. Right. Those things happen, and that's what connects us all. And I think you're absolutely right. I just had a conversation with my daughter. She struggles in math, and she was having a problem with her homework and kind of having a freak out. And she said, "But Mom, if I don't get a good grade, then I'm not going to be able to get into a good college, and then my whole life will be ruined." And I was like, "Babe, first of all, you're 12. You're going to be okay. And everything's going to work out just fine. Your life's not going to be ruined at all." But that's in her head, because they hear us, they hear the conversations about recruiting and college and grades and what you have to do and all of that. And this might be off topic, but changing the age, I think, is a great idea, because these 12 and 13-year-old girls don't need to be pressured like that.
That's where we started. I'm 27 years into this, and that's where it all started. And knowing, we're talking about ideally what should be happening, and being proactive in trying to create certain things that we can't control. But then we also have to stay up with the pace of the river. So, when it is what it is, that's where, again, someone that has the experience can kind of stay on the front end of things to say, hey, look, we're about to go through turbulence, rather than we've been bouncing around 5 minutes and you realize someone doesn't know how to manage it. And so that's key. Now, what your daughter had mentioned, if we had 1 million softball players and we could see the thought bubbles above their head when they're laying in bed, that is way all too common. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is it becomes imbalance. And again, just my opinion, but in my experience, the imbalance of achieve. So I've got to get good grades. I've got to attain these things. And I understand the importance of discipline and education. And we all know what a college education gives you and the opportunities it gives you, but at the expense of what? And so in my experience, too many kids go from achieving, I have to do this, I have to do that. And you don't realize, I know you don't mean it as a parent, when you're stating the fact that, look, if you get a B on this, you're going to have trouble getting into grad school at this particular college. But do you know how many 15-year-olds know that? And, be aware of it, one thing, but be worried about it is another thing. Mm-hmm. And then I've watched a lot of these young women that I've coached, go through the cycle, they go through college, and now they're expected to provide for themselves. We don't want to rent, we don't want to, so do you have that condo, do you have this? And now they have the stress of the mortgage, all part of normal living. Mm-hmm. But is it balanced? Are they okay with it? Are they completely stressed? Are they doing the math every day? Is it, and what I look for, Jolissa, is where's the purpose? What were they designed to be? Possibly this was part of your calling. You're very well put together. You present this very well. And if you didn't go through this, maybe you wouldn't have found your purpose. Purpose becomes so fulfilling. Absolutely. And that's the third part of this equation between achieving and providing that I don't want any of our kids to miss. When something like this happens, and then I always go back and I'm so thankful and appreciative that we took a path of this organization that is about the business end of it, but your beauty's first. And the most beautiful thing with every single player in our organization is her potential happiness for herself. Mm-hmm. So she can enjoy her life, try to find a balance to it, find that she does have value. But it's not always just in how her eyes are or what the physicality of things, because I explain to our girls all the time, you can be extremely ugly and be the most attractive person in the world or in the school just based on how you are and treating people. And in the other sense, how attractive are you when you're happy, you're making people feel good, people want to be around you. So it's not the attractive sense that it's always relationship based or it's a boyfriend girlfriend, but it's just the fact that you have friends. And then to go back where you mentioned about being alone, the more that somebody feels disconnected, the farther they remove themselves from people. And then their friends or people that they've known aren't comfortable reaching out to them anymore. And so the phone calls stop. And so that's where it's back. And so I think part of the message I've also been able to learn is that it's not that you have to go, hey, let's go out and do this, or let's have activity. It's like, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm thinking of you.
Just
hey,
a text.
Everything okay?
Yeah,
and you don't even have to respond back. But just because I don't think there's too many people in these situations where things aren't going well and whatever thoughts they may be having, where they said, no, I don't want anybody to text me either. I think they appreciate that. So I think that's a big part of it. So what can we do as parents and coaches in the softball world? Is it bringing someone like yourself more and speaking to our groups? I mean, how can we be proactive and just try to minimize the risk that's out there?
The other thing that I've been trained on is the Department of Mental Health here in Los Angeles provides what's called a QPR training for gatekeepers. Gatekeepers are anyone, including parents, friends, neighbors, teachers, coaches, advisors, caseworkers, anyone that is around kids, has access to kids. It is about an hour-long presentation. It'll teach you kind of what the warning signs are, what to look for, how to ask the questions, and then provide you with resources. It's not meant, you are not meant to then, become a crisis
counselor or
counselor.
Right.
It's just
education.
If you notice these, this
Sure.
is something you can do, and it helps. It helps to get more. The more people trained in this, the more people aware of how this works, what the signs are, what it looks like, how to talk about it, the more people are going to be saved.
I'll use one of my goofy analogies for people. So I really don't trust myself much outside of the softball world, and so cooking with grease. Mr. Tony over here has to Google and look up what's the potential for a grease fire and kind of what happens. And just knowing the first couple signs of this and what happens to grease when it gets hot and then it smokes and then it turns into this. But for me, it was I needed to know those two things before something turns into a fire in my house, because it's just me and my son in my house. So it's not like we feel very capable. But, it's warning signs. As you see this and that, and if you can act at this time, then this is less likely to happen as far as that outcome that you don't want to have happen. So is this an in-person type thing? Is there also any presentations online that anybody can watch or anything like that? Or
This is definitely in person. We give booklets and note cards and things like that. All the materials are provided by the Department of Mental Health. If people want information on this locally and we want to set things up, I set up a little email address if people want to email me. Great. So we can do that.
What would that be? What's that email address?
The email address is mentalhealthhero@gmail.com.
mentalhealthhero@gmail.com, just like it sounds.
Yes, we are all mental health heroes. We have the ability.
That's awesome.
Yes. And you know, it takes about a week for me to get all the materials together from the Department of Mental Health, and they just
Are you pretty busy with this, or not busy enough, would you say?
not busy enough.
Yeah.
Not
So that's
busy
what we
enough.
want to do. We want to bring the awareness. You know, if you would have asked me when I started coaching softball at 26 or 27, I'd be a softball man in my 50s. How does that sound, Rico? And I would have said, that sounds horrible. You know, that doesn't do anything for me. Softball has become an outlet to so many things and so many people. And if I could live my life 5 times over, I would do the same thing. Because this is all about, it's unveiling different layers. And the responsibilities are great when you have an operation like we have, but they're awesome responsibilities to just, I don't look at it as we have to change statistically what's happening. We have an opportunity to. So I know I got to know you through this, and I feel like we had a great conversation. Anybody that's listening and watching, I think that they've got some education. We've given them the crisis text line, a great email for them to reach out to, and don't wait for something. So, well, let me ask you this: we're going to wrap it up. Any last topic? Any lasting message you want to get either to players that might be listening, coaches? Any last thing that you want to get across, and then I'll wrap up on my end.
I would say, especially to the young ladies out there, anything that you are going through, someone has been through before. Nothing is new. If you are struggling with weight, if you are struggling with, you know, bullying, if you're struggling with your parents, if you're struggling with your sexuality, if you're struggling at all, you are not alone. There are people out there that feel and think and understand exactly what you're going through. You don't ever have to feel that you can't talk to someone. And if you're afraid to talk to someone, use the text line. If you know there's resources out there. People want to help. People want to help.
We care, and we're all trying to learn. You know, because this is outside of my realm, and it's just the responsibility. So there's not much more that needs to be said, Jolissa. I really, really appreciate you coming. I think we were dead on. And if anybody has any questions, you know, you can reach out to us through our website, replay some of this podcast. You've got some critical information that you can utilize for yourself. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you'd like to, for us to expand upon this, and we can do something. But I think for you and I, we're gonna shut the camera off, but then talk about how you and I can connect and start to connect with our coaches. So really appreciate you spending our time, and thank you for all you do for this part of what's happening with our young people, and really all people. So I really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate the platform here to get this message out. It's an important message. Thanks.
Well, you did great. Really appreciate it. Thank you.